All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme. Family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. The book is available on Amazon. And Sami, I give away the PDF for free to chronic Lyme survivors. I've been doing that since day one. Just reach out to me on social media, Facebook Messenger, and LinkedIn. Sami, I've given out close to 2,000 copies of the book. So I know it's made its way out there. The Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Go give us a thumbs up, ask a question. Sami and I will get to them all. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Go up, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. On the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast, I go deep into some of the topics that we discuss in Love, Hope, Lyme, and I bring on experts that know more about why certain topics happen in the Lyme community, what chronic Lyme survivors are looking for. And Sami, of course, I originally wrote the book for Lyme survivors, family members, partners, and friends to understand what their loved one goes through. And a big part of my audience really turned out to be chronic Lyme survivors who were looking for more support. We're looking to figure out ways to ask family members, partners, and friends, and to understand some of the challenges that they go through. And I'm excited today. We got Sami Kirschbaum. She's with the Lyme Resilience Collective, and I've gotten to know her. As a matter of fact, I'll talk a little bit later on in the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast about some work that we had done together, which truly was transformative to me. As most people know, I don't have chronic Lyme disease. I wrote the book to understand what chronic Lyme survivors go through. And I've continued doing the podcast to basically help Lyme survivors get the support that they need. All right, Sami, I'm excited to talk to you today. I think you're a brilliant young lady who has done some amazing work, and I'm excited to talk in detail about what you're doing at the Lyme Resilience Collective. And I'm just going to read what you have on your website. It says, "We are a movement dedicated to empowering individuals battling Lyme disease, mold illness, and related chronic conditions through the power of community education and innovative healing practices. We stand together, committed to transforming lives." All right, so tell us what that means, and tell us why you created the Lyme Resilience Collective.
Yes, thank you for having me, Fred. And thanks for checking out my email to see my main mission. I use a power of community. I call it the Lyme Resilience Collective because it's a collective of people. It's a collective of knowledge. It's a collective of resources. And then I use transformative healing techniques to empower patients' voice, clients' voice, due to all the medical gaslighting that we experience in this community. And I also help people with the somatic aspects of chronic pain and healing from that. But the education piece is extremely powerful, which is why one of the services I offer are my nervous system regulation support groups, which maybe we'll talk about later. But it's about creating a sense of community for these people that feel very isolated in this experience or misunderstood or maybe even dismissed. And also providing the education on nervous system regulation techniques. And then I also provide group brain spotting as well as individual brain spotting services, which is a trauma-based healing modality.
All right. And I'll let people know right now, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. I actually went through one of your brain spotting sessions, and it was very transformative. And we'll talk in a little bit. So if you're comfortable, would you mind telling us a little bit about your Lyme journey? Again, you're also a chronic Lyme survivor. Tell us whatever you want to tell us about your journey to get you to this point.
So I got bit when I was a little girl in central Wisconsin. I had undiagnosed Lyme disease like many people for many, many years. I got properly diagnosed in 2020. The past 4 years, I've saw probably over 120 practitioners, trying to find someone that can help me, who's knowledgeable to support me and find treatments that felt right to me. At this moment, I also am still treating mold illness as well. So we know that that kind of goes hand in hand. And a big thing, which is why I started the Lyme Resilience Collective, is because I'll never forget sitting in a doctor's office and begging for help with my 54 symptoms. And the practitioner said she wouldn't give me a referral for a rheumatologist, but she said, "Fine, I'll run these tests, but don't expect anything to come back. I think you're just depressed." And I'm in the mental health field. I was in grad school at the time. She told me that for mental health therapy. So to hear that was like, what? I'm actually not depressed. I have lots of reasons I could be. It would make logical sense with what's going on, but I'm not. And to have that medical dismissal broke my heart. It was a slap in the face, and I'll just never forget that. And it ignited this passion inside me that, by the way, the Lyme test did end up, I was lucky it came back positive. So she was wrong. But it was just an unfortunate experience. And I realized it's not just me this is happening to. This is happening to a lot of people on a mass scale. So started connecting with people, and I was like, how can I use this mental health background with this brain spotting technique I'm trained in to help specifically people in the Lyme or tick-borne illness community? So
Yeah, as you're describing that, I could see people watching this nodding their heads because I've spoken to so many people who have gone to many doctors, and eventually, the last doctor will say, we can't test for anything, or we don't see anything, or we tried everything. It must be in your head. And one of the reasons why I wrote the book is, family members who would say, well, the doctor just said you need to go to a mental institution, when it's not that. It's trying to figure out what actually happened to you. So thanks again for sharing that and for turning what you went through into a service that's providing value for people in the Lyme community. You mentioned the term nervous system regulation. So can you explain what that means? And again, you're a mental health professional. So give us, people who are listening, give them a deeper understanding of what that means and why it's so important.
okay, so this also leads to the topic of trauma that I'd like to touch on.
Mhm.
When we go through traumatic experiences, a lot of people think that the event itself is a trauma. But actually, what trauma is the person's physical response to protect itself in the traumatic experience. So that's why we can have two people go through a similar traumatic event, we would call it, or a traumatic experience. Well, why did this person feel traumatized from it and not the other? It's because of that physical reaction. So we know that trauma is actually held within the body. It's not in our rational brain, which is why when we're going to heal trauma, it has to be from the body and the mind, but it truly starts in the body. A lot of people think it's an emotional response, but truly it's actually in the nervous system, and it's a very primitive reflex of protection.
So why is it such a challenge with people with chronic Lyme disease? Talk a little more deeply about that, about why is this something that needs to be addressed?
So we know that going through a traumatic experience, whether it's a surgery, death of a loved one, they can be traumatic and kind of turn on the light for someone that maybe had Lyme disease in kind of dormancy, and then it kind of comes out and it's aggressive and exacerbates. So when we experience these, we kind of, what we say in the community of brain spotting that I'm in, we can have someone that goes into stuck on or stuck off. So imagine that like a light switch. Stuck on, if someone is in a heightened state of that nervous system, the stuck on can look like things with panic, hypervigilance, high anxiety, running around, never feeling resting. And we know that rest and digest is extremely important. So how can we get to that homeostasis? But with the stuck off, I want to point out that that can look more like lethargy, being lethargic, being depressed, kind of shutting down, disassociating, and kind of stuck off. So you have these two different realms, and we want to be in the middle. We don't want to be in stuck on all the time, and we don't want to be in stuck off. So it's important to have nervous system regulation so that we can stay in that flow and continue functioning appropriately through life.
So I want to talk about the distinction between guilt and shame. So when I first decided to, when I realized that I wanted to learn more about what a loved one was going through with chronic Lyme disease, I tell this story many times. If you type in best pizza in Milwaukee, a million pages are going to come up in the internet. If you type in Lyme disease spouse, for example, there's like one page maybe. And I typed that in 3 years ago. Again, we're doing today's interview in the late summer of 2024, and one page came up, and it was an article written about how somebody was guilty about being a horrible sister, aunt, cousin, spouse, coworker, colleague, whatever it might be, mother, etc. I want to talk about the distinction between guilt and shame, but first, why is guilt such a common feeling when you have chronic Lyme disease?
Yeah, so people can feel guilty because of the limitations that they're currently experiencing, whether that's cognitive or maybe physical as well, like not being able to go to that family event or that social event, or taking a step back from our friends. And we can feel guilty for not being able to go. But this is a perfect spot to distinct between the shame and the guilt, because a lot of people use them interchangeably, or they'll say that they feel guilty, but actually it's shame hiding underneath. And I just learned about this within the past year, and I've been doing a lot of shame resilience work myself through actionable steps and also through Brainspotting as a client for myself too. So to simplify it, shame is the cognition, I am bad. I am bad. Innately, I am flawed and I am bad. Guilt is I've done something bad. So it's an action and you feel guilty about it. And Brene Brown is a shame researcher. That's how I've learned about shame resilience. And she says that when we feel guilt, there is motivation to change. But when we feel shame, there's no motivation. It's kind of a shutdown because we're shameful, and shame grows when it's silent. That's how it has its power over us. So she said in her book, I thought it was just me, but it isn't, that if you take shame and you put it in a petri dish and you put silence on top of it, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. So to overcome that, we need to create the emotional literacy to be able to first feel shame in our body, become aware of that. Then we can learn how to express that to other people and speak to it so we can communicate about it and deepen our relationships with people. So how that might show up for people in the Lyme and chronic illness community is feeling shameful for not being able to go do XYZ. And a lot of times it's an internalized shame, but it comes from external factors. So it's because your mom calls you and says, you just never come around. You don't come to the family events. It's, how could you not? It was your niece's birthday. You know how important that was. And we have these chronic illness individuals who they would want nothing else than to be at these family events, to socialize, to have connection. And they're unable to go because they don't feel good. And then on top of feeling horrible on the inside, we have people shaming us for what we can and cannot do, or how we're doing it even. Kind of like a lot of people will go to various different doctors trying to find different treatments. And we have people go, well, if you just thought more positively, or have you tried yoga? Or, you're just making this up. And that shame, she defines shame after her years of research as the intensely painful experience or feeling of being flawed and therefore unworthy of love. So it's really a fear connected with the shame, and it's the fear of disconnection, because as humans, we want to be connected. We're social beings and we need that. So shame is super important to work on.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful description there. So I want to shift to talking about brain spotting. And I want to let people know who are listening to today's Love Hope Lyme podcast. Thank you so much. I'm talking with Sami Kirschbaum, and she's with the Lyme Resilience Collective. So again, I met you on social media, as I've met thousands of people, and I was intrigued by what you're doing. And I went through a brain spotting session with you. And just to remind people, I don't have Lyme disease, but I'm a human being. So there are things that I'm looking to continue to improve upon. And let's talk about exactly what it is. But I want people to know it was very transformative. It stuck with me for days. And I've continued to think about where it took me and why it worked. And I know it's very hard to say why it works, but it does. So explain what brain spotting is, because I didn't know what it was until we went through the process. I was actually afraid that you're getting into my physically tapping into my brain, but it's a technique that you use. And after I had met you, I went to the internet and typed it into YouTube and found like hundreds of videos of people demonstrating it and why it works. So explain what it is, and tell us more about why it could be valuable for people with chronic Lyme disease.
So Brainspotting, I also was intrigued by the name when I first heard of it. I was like, what is that? And there was Dr. McIntyre at my internship for counseling. And I was like, I heard you're a brain spotter. Tell me all about it. And he's like, okay, well, where you look affects how you feel. And David Grand's the founder of Brainspotting, and I've been trained in it now for 2 years. And I was like, do you mind if I sit in and watch some of your clients process, if they're okay with that? And he said, absolutely, let me get permission. So I was able to sit in and physically watch how powerful it was. But to break it down on what it exactly is Brainspotting is a top trauma healing modality. A lot of people are aware EMDR. It's definitely more of the buzzword for therapy. So more people know about EMDR. But David Grant actually used to be an EMDR therapist. And then he founded Brainspotting, and he found for his clients, they were having more rapid healing. And he liked that you could be creative with it and flow with it. And we trust that the person's brain and body knows what it needs to heal itself. And the therapist, we hold the space for the client. So it has shown through research to help people with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and more research is coming out still today. It utilizes the client's visual field, so where they can see in front of them, along with bilateral sound stimulation. So they'll be wearing earphones. Some people don't like to wear the headphones and do music, but it can help because it's integrating the body with the left and the right hemisphere while you're processing. And then additionally to that, we have a body orientation. So when we start off the session, everything is about the body because we can't have trauma processing from our neocortex, which is the higher part of our brain. And that's why really for like brain retraining, I really prefer brain spotting because it has to heal inside the body, and we can't rationalize this part where trauma is held in the body doesn't have language. It has no sense of time. It just has a memory of protecting ourselves, and it is strong and sometimes gets embedded, and it can look like people are overreacting to things, but really it's just their trauma responses coming out, the flight, fight, freeze, fawning behaviors. So with that body orientation, we focus on where do you feel that inside your body? And a lot of times we're using different techniques like body spotting. I do parts work with brain spotting, or IFS. It's called internal family systems. And people can communicate with these parts inside them, whether it's an angry part, a depressed part, the part of them that longs to feel better. And something beautiful is, yes, we can use brain spotting for trauma healing. But what I'm most excited about too is that we can use it for other things like cognitive rewiring. So maybe there's neurological programmings that we've received over time. Maybe we believe that we're unlovable, or we're deserving of bad things, or my body's shameful and ugly and I don't like it. Well, we can literally have neuroplasticity at our fingertips. And with brain spotting, we can have new neural connections to have to unlearn those programmings that we had, and then have the real adult mature brain come online and say, whoa, I am lovable. Even though I can't attend all these family events because I have chronic illness, I'm still worthy of love. I'm still worthy of belonging. And then we also can expand into states of being, like, especially if this is why I like to focus with my chronic illness clients. They're constantly usually in a state of chaos and stress in the mind and the body. What's in the brain's in the body, what's in the body's in the brain, right? And so having that nervous system regulation is imperative.
Wow. So how does it, is it something where you need to do like for a year, or will one session help rewire the brain? Is it related to like hypnotherapy, or talk a little more about specifically if I'm someone with chronic Lyme disease? And I've met so many people with chronic Lyme disease, and brain fog and all the emotional trauma type things that we brought up is part and parcel, right? So talk about how this as a practice will help them. How long do they need to do it, et cetera?
Yeah, everyone loves asking that question. And I did too at first. I was like, how long do I have to do this? Will I feel better this here, here, here? I didn't know. But what I do with my clients is a really comprehensive intake. So I take a list of all the traumas from childhood, traumas from adulthood, and also the whole list of negative cognitions that they might hold. So we'll go through, on a scale of 0 to 10, how believable is it that you feel unworthy of love, or you feel shameful? And my point in explaining this is I take a comprehensive intake with them to really see what are we looking at, because everyone's coming with different things. Some people have a whole lifetime of trauma
Mm,
that they need to work through. Some people just had an event and then the physical
mm.
trauma reaction, and they want to work through that one thing that happened. But for a lot of people, what we find, especially why parts work is important with this, is that we'll find that the things they're currently struggling with are actually from much younger experiences, maybe when we were 8 years old, maybe when we were 10. So really healing at the root cause versus that surface level, how it's showing up in our current life.
Interesting. So, is there anything else we haven't discussed that you want to make sure that you get across to people to understand what exactly? Yeah, because a lot of people are looking for solutions, right? And the one thing that I
Mhm.
realized, Sami, again, we're talking to Sami Kirschbaum today, is when I decided to dive deep into this, I'll be honest with you, and I say this in my book, I thought Lyme was like every other type of disease or illness. Go see a doctor, he or she gives you a pill. 2 months later, you're fine. You just got to find the right treatment. As a lot of people who are listening to this knows, it's very complicated. Once Lyme has gotten past, an initial stage, the spirochetes can go all over your body and create a whole bunch of different types of things. So it is very, very complicated. And there's a lot of things that go into recovery. There's, of course, the physical recovery. And then I love the way you're talking about how recovery from trauma and shock and all those types of things. Is there anything that we missed that you definitely want to bring up to make sure that we get this story complete?
Yeah, I've had a couple people ask online when they see my services for brain spotting. They're like, hey, does that cure Lyme disease? And
Mm,
no, I'm not claiming to cure anyone's Lyme disease. What I am doing is providing a social well-being, mental well-being service so that you can meet other people in the community because I'm educated on, if we have a sense of community and trauma happens collectively and we can heal collectively from trauma, and shame happens between people and it needs to be healed between people. So I know from my own experience going through, I started training in brain spotting in 2021, but I learned about it in 2020, which is when I got my Lyme diagnosis.
mm,
And I really put a lot of thankfulness into brain spotting as one of the things that kept me going, helped grow my resilience, helped me have the mental strength to continue all the treatments and all the waves and the ebbs and flows of times of really great health and times of really bad health. So coming together as a community, I just think is so important, which is why I do the group work as well as the individual work. And some people prefer to do group work. They're okay with that. It feels connecting. And some people rather do that kind of work individual with a therapist. And I think I just want to touch on briefly the medical gaslighting aspect.
mm.
We have so many people that are told it's in your head, we can't help you, and that really does damage in the core of ourselves, in our soul. Like I kind of do think it's a soul wound, I would like to call it. They make us question ourselves, other people question us, and to have a person that you can go to who understands Lyme disease, who understands why you just had to move out of your house and you're living in a tent because of mold, like to go to someone who truly gets that and not have another person questioning you and is just there and ready to hold your hand and walk the journey with you, I think is really important. And I feel for me, I was hoping for help from a lot of therapists throughout the process. And I realized I was being in the educator role when I would go see therapists because now they're saying, well, I thought Lyme disease was cured. And instead of focusing on the really support I needed, I'm just becoming an educator for the therapist. So it was important for me to find a person that understood me.
Yeah, that's great. We've done a number of shows on gaslighting, and you mentioned before you had gone to close to 120 different medical practitioners to figure out what was going on in your body. And I just want to acknowledge you for what you're doing to help people. And I know you're going to keep growing your practice. And again, just want to tell people I did the brain spotting exercise with you, and again, it was very helpful. I think it's a modality that can definitely be of value for people. And again, you could just find Lyme Resilience Collective. Sami's on pretty much all the social media aspects, Facebook, Instagram, etc. You can find her there. And I want to thank you for being on today's Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, please go up and give us a thumbs up. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. This is Fred Diamond, and this is the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast.